Thank you so much, Ruth. And thank you so much for everyone who's spoken so far already. It's a real honour to invite and welcome the NAFASI crew to London. I was with the NAFASI crew in Brazil this summer, and it's just such an amazing gang. So I was chatting to Robert, who just spoke last night, about the talk today, and Robert asked to put creative activism, from my experience, I'm from around the corner in Brick Lane, into a British context. Like, why are we being creative activists here? What for? So I just wanted to start off with a bit of doom and gloom before we go on to the creative resistance that's going on in Britain at the moment. And of course, it's really interesting hearing the NAFASI crew's position on Britain, because obviously in Britain, we paint ourselves as Great Britain and you know, the providers of democracy all around the world. We don't get taught about colonialism in schools. Just to carry on from what Robert was saying, in terms of colonialism, who remembers what David Cameron said after the film 12 Years a Slave came out? Anyone remember? The reparations movement said to David Cameron, okay, whilst there's now renewed attention on colonialism and slavery, can we have our stuff back, please? And David Cameron responded like this: I'm sorry you feel that way. Which is like the worst false apology. I mean, Robert, go take a look at the British Museum whilst you're here, which isn't far from here. There's nothing British in there. It's stolen from around the world.
As well. He offered to build a prison as well.
Oh.
That was the nice thing that he did. He said, well, you know, what I will do is build you a prison.
Oh, lovely. Good old David Cameron.
David Cameron.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's part of what Britain's about. So just to say where I first met in Place of War, like I said, I'm from around the corner. Brick Lane, which in the NAFASI crew we will go for a walk down tomorrow, is one of the most multicultural areas in London, in Britain, and it's got a really strong history of resistance. My grandparents came after the war because they were Holocaust survivors, and back then there was a lot of Jewish migrants here. And it has been a hotbed of multiculturalism and resistance to racism and fascism, and that's something to be proud of. Whilst Britain is obviously the belly of the beast when it comes to empire and neo-colonialism, there is thankfully a lot of good resistance to respond to that. And a few last things in terms of where we're at now. Britain is the second biggest arms dealer in the world. Obviously, since Brexit, there's this crisis, this unexpected crisis of why people might want to get into Britain, not to mention the wars that we started in the first place. Austerity, if you walk around this area at night, we were not far, we were just up the road last night, and homelessness is heartbreaking. It's on the rise, just so much. So if we walk around tonight, you'll just see the levels of homelessness and inequality. The UK has the highest level of child poverty throughout the industrialised world. It's the 7th richest country in the Western world, yet the most unequal. It has more inequality now than in the time of Dickens. And there's lots of movements who work on illegal detention, deaths, primarily black deaths in police custody. There's a lot going wrong, not to mention the hopefully not slide into fascism that is going on at the moment with the rising right wing and the racist border policies, etc. So I thought I'd put a bit of the doom and gloom at the beginning, but then talk about the really fascinating stuff that's going on in response. And to go on from what David was saying before in terms of why art, why creativity, I wanted to read a little quote, because we can walk from A to B and hope that something will change, but one of the biggest demonstrations in Britain in 2003 was against the Iraq War, where a lot of my generation got really disillusioned because there was millions of people out on the street and nothing changed. And Tony Blair is still walking free as a war criminal. So why art? Why do we have to up the ante from walking from A to B? And it's a quote from one of the most inspiring people in the world, Assata Shakur from the Black Panthers. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. So we have to win. We have to win. Just over the road, the NAFASI crew, just for your information, is the City of London, the square mile where some of the most horrific human rights abusing, planet trashing corporations in the world exist. And they've got 100, 200-year plans of how to dominate the world. We have to be strong and have long-term plans to counteract that. And I just wanted to, before I go into what the things that I've been lucky enough to do, give an example. I didn't put their picture in the presentation because I forgot. Is anyone part of Sisters Uncut here? No. Sisters Uncut are an incredible creative direct action movement at the moment, fighting against the austerity, in particularly the cuts to domestic violence services. Recently, some of my friends were involved. One example of incredible action of what got all over the papers, raised the public imagination. They occupied the red carpet of the Suffragettes movie screening with the message on their legs and on their arms saying, "Dead women can't vote." Harnessing history as a propeller for understanding and action today. And since then, they've occupied spaces and won key demands to bring back domestic violence services back. So there's a lot of incredible, creative, successful activism in Britain. So I just wanted to do a shout out to them. I don't know how this works. Oh, there we go. So I just wanted to start on where I connected with In Place of War. I talked about where my family are from. It was a project called Never Again Ever, which was led by grandchildren of the Nazi Holocaust on the the 70th anniversary of the official end of it last year, where we worked with Holocaust survivors and young people to bring out what does it mean, because at the end of the war, the United Nations said never again ever, yet we see the rise in neo-Nazis, we see the rise in racist border policies, we see what's going on in the Mediterranean, and much more. We see what's going on with the Calais camp, which is going to be shut down next week, and I think they've let in 14 children this week. Thank you very much. My granddad was a Holocaust survivor who came on the Kinder transport. You'll see a statue by Liverpool Street Station, just next door. And just the contradictions and the hypocrisies of what's going on now with Calais is huge. So you'll see there is my friend Ruth Barnett. And what we wanted to do to launch the campaign was have a Holocaust survivors cabaret, using the format of cabaret from the Weimar era in Berlin, where the Nazis initially attacked, to bring to life the meanings of it today. And there's a concept called Holocaust impiety and Holocaust piety. And it's relevant to all areas of how we deal with trauma. Holocaust piety, the kind of understanding that you can only deal with trauma in a very mournful, somber, earnest way, which is useful in some contexts, but actually we need art, we need music, we need creativity to deal with the traumas that we've been through. And we asked Ruth, and she's a fighter, she's fierce. She came up with the idea of, well, why don't I come out of a coffin which says Holocaust, singing I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor, which was just amazing. And then that was, Ruth, you've got to tell us, but I've got 2 minutes left because I babbled too much. Here, we went outside the Home Office with thousands of shoes to animate, obviously, the iconic pictures from outside Auschwitz, but what's going on with the Home Office's responsibility, or lack of responsibility, with migrant deaths today, particularly in the Mediterranean. So that's some of the projects that we've done around there. Here we go. Oh, you can read it, obviously, on the bottom. But this particularly for NAFASI friends, that is the Houses of Parliament. And if we obviously want to raise the agenda, we've got to raise it on iconic spaces. A lot of what we do before planning campaigns and planning actions is think, how can we get this on the front of the press, as well as stop business as usual? It's not all just press stunts. So basically, this was an environmental campaign years ago where I was part of a group called Plain Stupid and was challenging the rise in airport expansion. And this whole issue is going to be announced again on Tuesday with the announcement about Heathrow. But anyway, we got on top of the Houses of Parliament with a banner wrapped around ourselves. And I might as well admit it, because everyone was like, how did you get up there? There was this whole outcry in Parliament after. Never give them too much credit for their fire escape routes. We just got up the fire escape, and I'm sure they've tightened it since then. But, you know, we can't give them too much credit for their intelligence sometimes. How much left, Bobby? 2 minutes. Okay, I'll just give a few other examples. This was winning an award in 10 Downing Street, where the Prime Minister, the ex-Prime Minister Gordon Brown in that case, lived. And I won this award for working around environmental issues, climate change issues, got this invite to this award ceremony for campaigning by the Prime Minister, who wanted to expand all the runways, which contributes to so much pollution. And I was winning an award for protesting against it. So I said to my friend who lives under the flight path, what can we do to highlight this hypocrisy? How can we reframe it and challenge power from co-opting our grassroots narrative. She said, well, I know, why don't we write a speech, and then when it comes to your turn to shake his hand, you super glue him, and then you read your speech out. And I was like, that's a great idea, Tracy. She was like, I'm only joking, don't super glue the Prime Minister. But that's exactly what we did. And so when it came to my turn, I had glue in little baggies on the outside of my boxers and a hole in my trouser pocket, squeezed it, really nervous, and then the words were, don't move, Mr. Prime Minister. Everyone in the room was like, what's he going to do? Is he going to blow up? I've stuck myself to your arm to say that you can run away from climate change, but you can run away from my arm eventually, but you can't run away from climate change. It's time that you stood up to the bullies of the British aviation industry and stood up for the general public. And by that point, there was loads of like posh NGO charity people in the room. They were all clapping and cheering. And he just kind of unstuck his fingers from my arm and scuttled away. And he played it very well, because it was kind of perfect. I was winning an award for protesting, so what do they expect? And then I just want to give one last example. Oh no, it's at the beginning. What do we think is going on here? Any guesses? So, do you remember, so we've done a lot of campaigns against UKIP and the rise of the right wing, the fascist groups in Britain at the moment. And we invaded Nigel Farage's pub last year with lots of different groups affected by their prejudice, and apparently chased his kids out, but we've just obviously got the CCTV footage that there were no kids. But anyway, before that, I'm a part of a group around healthcare in Britain, and the NAFASI crew, the NHS is being sold off to the highest bidder at the moment. Anyway, Nigel Farage from UKIP said, frankly, the last kind of migrants that we should allow into the UK are those living with HIV. Someone in UKIP also talked about putting us in quarantine. So we found out where their offices are, the UKIP South London office, took half a ton of horse manure, put it outside their office. That's me and my better half having a snog. In freezing cold, December the 1st, World AIDS Day, you can't tell my legs are going blue. And put a red ribbon over the half ton of shit. And the message says, stop spreading filth. What goes around comes around. Solidarity on World AIDS Day. And UKIP ended up getting kicked out of their office, which was more than we could have ever expected. And again, we didn't get arrested because we did our homework before that, and it wasn't criminal damage because we took our, I always forget the name, the material, and put the poo on the material and then just took it away. So we didn't even get arrested, so we're here to fight another day. So I just hope that's a bit of context of where we're at in Britain. We could obviously go on, and some of the things that we're doing in response. And I'm just really looking forward to the rest of the day of all the incredible people in one space. So thanks for having us.
Thank you so much,